Remember when Canadian TV wasn't just hockey and news, but magical department stores coming alive after hours and raccoons fighting corporate greed in the evergreen forest? These forgotten gems shaped our childhoods and defined what it means to be Canadian in ways we're only now beginning to understand. But which of these beloved shows secretly had the greatest impact on our national identity? Coming in at number 8 on our countdown of forgotten TV shows that defined Canadian culture is The Friendly Giant, a series that opened with the gentle sounds of a recorder playing early one morning as a castle appeared on screen. For 15 minutes each day, Bob Home invited children into his castle with the most comforting words in Canadian television history. Look up, way up, and I'll call Rusty. Those simple words signaled to kids across the country that it was time to settle in as the giant arranged tiny furniture. One little chair for one of you, and a bigger chair for two more to curl up in, creating an atmosphere so distinctly Canadian in its unhurried gentleness. The Friendly Giant aired from 1958 to 1985, running for nearly 3 decades when Canadian identity was still finding its footing on the world stage, offering children stability through consistent routines and quiet storytelling that contrasted sharply with the frenetic energy of American children's programming. As we continue our journey through the shows that shaped us, take a moment to join our community of fellow Canadians exploring these cultural touchstones by subscribing. We're diving into these forgotten treasures every week. Now, sliding into number 7, the raccoons transported viewers to the evergreen forest where Bert Raccoon and his friends battled against the environmentally destructive schemes of aardvark industrialist Cyril Sneer. The show's animation quality stood head and shoulders above other Canadian productions of the era, with rich forest landscapes that captured the mystique of our vast wilderness. But what truly etched the raccoons into our collective memory was Lisa Lougheed's hauntingly beautiful end credit song, Run With Us, a power ballad so quintessentially 80s yet timeless that it still triggers an emotional response from Canadians who can sing every word decades later. The Raccoons wasn't just entertainment, it was perhaps our first exposure to environmental messaging, teaching a generation of Canadian children about conservation values long before climate change entered the mainstream conversation. For number 6 on our countdown, we venture to the rugged shores of British Columbia with the Beachcombers, the longest running Canadian dramatic series of all time that aired for an impressive 19 years. The show's opening sequence of Nick Adonitis piloting his boat Persephone through the choppy waters of the Sunshine Coast became a visual shorthand for a distinctly Canadian way of life, one where nature wasn't just scenery but a character itself, sometimes benevolent, not often challenging. The smell of salt air and fresh coffee from Molly's Reach Cafe practically wafted through television screens as viewers followed the ongoing rivalry between Greek Canadian log salvager Nick and Beachcomber Relic. What made the Beachcombers revolutionary was its casual multiculturalism that reflected Canada's evolving identity. This wasn't a show that made a character's ethnicity their defining trait, but rather integrated diverse backgrounds into the fabric of the storytelling in an organic way that was years ahead of its time. Moving to number 5, today's special transported young viewers into the magical world of a department store after closing time, when Mannequin Jeff would come to life with the placement of his magical hat and the words Hocus Pocus Alamagocus. The show captured a particular moment in Canadian retail culture when department stores still served as downtown anchors in cities across the country, their display windows changing with the seasons and serving as community gathering spaces. The squeaking wheels of the stock cart pushed by warehouse manager Sam, the soft patter of Muffy the Mouse's footsteps, and the distinctive electronic chime that signaled Jeff's transformation created an auditory landscape immediately recognizable to Canadian children of the 80s. The series offered a gentle introduction to workplace dynamics and problem solving, while celebrating imagination and friendship. Parents often planned shopping trips around the show's broadcast schedule, walking children past mannequins in real department stores like Eaton's in the Bay, encouraging whispers of, "Do you think they come alive at night too?" Creating a magical intersection between television fantasy and Canadian daily life. Shifting to number 4 on our countdown, Street Legal brought sophisticated urban drama to Canadian screens, with its portrayal of a Toronto law firm navigating complex legal and personal challenges. The show's opening saxophone riff and aerial shots of Toronto's rapidly developing skyline announced this wasn't the Canada of wilderness adventures or small town charm, but a modern nation grappling with contemporary issues. Street Legal dared to address topics like AIDS, abortion, and racial discrimination when many American shows avoided such controversy, creating dinner table conversations across the country as families processed these complex social issues together. The character of Olivia Novak, played by Cynthia Dale, broke new ground for female characters on Canadian television. Ambitious, flawed, sexual, and unapologetically powerful at a time when women were still fighting for equal footing in the legal profession. As cable television began offering Canadians more viewing options in the early 90s, Street Legal represented a last stand of sorts for distinctly Canadian primetime drama. Its cancellation in 1994 signaling a shift in broadcasting priorities that many viewers experienced as a personal loss. For number 3, North of 60 brought viewers to the fictional Dene community of Lynx River in the Northwest Territories, providing most Southern Canadians their first nuanced glimpse into contemporary Indigenous life beyond stereotypes and historical accounts. The show's creative team worked closely with Indigenous consultants to ensure authentic representation, resulting in characters that defied simplistic categorization. The series premiered in 1992 against the backdrop of the OK crisis aftermath, when national conversations about Canada's relationship with Indigenous peoples were gaining new urgency. The show's visual palette captured the stark beauty of northern landscapes, endless summer days and long winter nights, the crunch of snow underfoot, and community gatherings in the local band office became sensory touchpoints for viewers. Many Canadian families would gather weekly to watch, the blue light of CRT televisions illuminating conversations about issues many communities had long ignored. When production ended in 1998, something precious was lost. A regular invitation for non-Indigenous Canadians to engage with Indigenous perspectives and recognize the ongoing impacts of colonization within a narrative format that prioritized entertainment and human connection over didactic messaging. Coming in at number 2 on our countdown, the Degrassi franchise stands as Canada's most enduring contribution to television storytelling about adolescence. Spanning multiple iterations from 1979's The Kids of Degrassi Street through Degrassi Junior High, Degrassi High, and eventually Degrassi, The Next Generation. While American teen shows presented glossy, aspirational versions of high school life, Degrassi gave us braces, awkward school dances, and real consequences, all delivered with that unmistakable Canadian accent we never tried to hide. The squeak of sneakers on linoleum hallways, the metallic clang of locker doors, and the murmur of cafeteria conversations created an auditory landscape immediately familiar to anyone who attended a Canadian public school. Degrassi achieved what seemed impossible: international success without sacrificing its Canadian identity, proving our stories could resonate beyond our borders while remaining authentically rooted in our cultural experience. The show's commitment to addressing difficult subjects like teen pregnancy, suicide, and sexual identity fostered intergenerational conversations in living rooms across the country, with parents often just as invested in the characters' journeys as their children. When Degrassi tackled the AIDS crisis through the character of Dwayne in the early 90s, it did so at a time when misinformation and stigma were rampant. offering viewers a humanized perspective that challenged prejudice through storytelling rather than preaching. The franchise's remarkable longevity mirrored Canada's own evolution. From the analog simplicity of the 80s through the digital transformation of the new millennium, Degrassi remained our most reliable cultural touchstone for understanding Canadian adolescence. As cable television and later streaming services increasingly offered young Canadians access to American content, Degrassi's continued success represented a quiet form of cultural resistance, a stubborn insistence that our stories mattered and deserved screen time. For many Canadian actors now working internationally, Degrassi provided their first professional opportunity, creating a talent pipeline that enriched our cultural industries. When Aubrey Graham transformed from wheelchair bound Jimmy Brooks into global superstar Drake, it felt like a victory for Canadian culture writ large, proof that our homegrown productions could launch careers with a worldwide impact. As streaming platforms increasingly blurred national distinctions in content, Degrassi's unapologetically Canadian perspective feels more precious than ever. A reminder of television's power to reflect and shape national identity through stories that refuse to sand down their cultural specificity in pursuit of broader appeal. And finally, we arrive at number one on our countdown of forgotten TV shows that defined Canadian culture. Mr. Dress Up, the gentle children's program that ran for nearly 3 decades and shaped generations of young Canadians with its emphasis on creativity, kindness, and imagination. From 1967 to 1996, Ernie Coombs invited children into his television home, where the Tickle Trunk stood ready to provide costumes for any adventure and puppets. Casey and Finnegan waited in their treehouse to join the day's activities. The distinctive sound of Mr. Dress Up opening his tickle trunk, that creaking hinge followed by a musical flourish, created a Pavlovian response of anticipation in children across the country, while the soft-spoken exchanges with his puppet friends modeled gentle communication in contrast to the louder, more frenetic energy of American children's television. The show's craft projects using materials found in any Canadian home, egg cartons, paper towel tubes, construction paper, fostered creativity within accessibility, teaching children that imagination didn't require expensive supplies or perfect execution. Mr. Yer Dress Up aired during a period when Canadian identity was asserting itself more confidently on the world stage, and the program's modest, creative approach to children's entertainment reflected values many Canadians recognized as central to our national character. Parents who grew up with Mr. Dress Up eagerly introduced their own children to the show, creating a multi-generational viewing experience that strengthened cultural continuity. Unlike children's programming focused on marketable characters or merchandise opportunities, Mr. Dress Up remained steadfastly educational and nurturing, prioritizing child development over commercial potential in a way that aligned with Canada's more community-minded approach to broadcasting. When Ernie Coombs died in 2001, the national outpouring of grief transcended typical reactions to a celebrity passing. Canadians mourned him as a beloved family member who had shaped our collective childhood. Taken together, these 8 television shows trace the evolution of Canadian identity through the medium that perhaps most powerfully shaped our shared cultural experience in the latter half of the 20th century. From The Friendly Giant's gentle storytelling to Mr. Dress Up's creative nurturing, from The Beachcomber's regional specificity to Degrassi's unflinching realism, these programs offered Canadians mirrors to see ourselves reflected and windows to understand different experiences within our vast country. While American content increasingly dominated our airwaves, these distinctly Canadian shows provided cultural touchstones that transcended our geographical distances and linguistic differences, creating a common vocabulary of references that still resonate decades later. In an era of global streaming platforms and content algorithms that rarely prioritize Canadian stories, remembering these foundational programs isn't merely an exercise in nostalgia. It's a recognition of how culture shapes national identity and a reminder of television's power to foster connection across differences. These shows weren't just entertainment, they were shared experiences that helped define what it means to grow up Canadian, a legacy that continues to influence our cultural landscape even as the medium itself transforms around us.